We're going to go ahead and get started.
No, I didn't.
Okay. My name is Ron Gonen, and I'm a MBA grad from Columbia Business School, and I also teach a course on social entrepreneurship here in the spring. I'll give you a little bit of my background, but first I'd like to hear from the panelists in terms of their backgrounds and an introduction, and I'll say a few things about my background, and then we'll jump into the topic and hopefully have a lively discussion on our focus today. So we have a large panel, so I'm going to go ahead and start down that way in terms of just introductions and a brief bio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jimena Almendares. I was most recently the Chief Product Officer at OKCupid, leading many different teams. We IPO'd last year. Before that, I worked at Meetup, Zynga, Facebook, and Eventbrite. And before that, I worked in Europe for many years, grew up in Mexico.
Hey, my name's Jimmy Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Propel. We aim to make the food stamp program more user-friendly through software. I was previously a product manager at Facebook, and before that, a product manager at LinkedIn.
Chris Davis, I'm the CFO of Managed by Q. Our mission is to make the world work better. How that manifests itself right now is we provide services to small and medium-sized businesses. Some of those services, like cleaning, are supplied by employees of Q, and some services are provided in our preferred partner network. I've previously been at media companies, Open Road, Huffington Post.
Hi, I'm Jenny Fielding. I'm Managing Director at Techstars. We're a venture capital fund, and we're on our third fund. We also run accelerator programs, 24 of them globally. And you probably know Startup Weekend. We acquired that last year, and so now we're running Startup Weekends in, I believe, 160 countries worldwide. I look at two verticals. I invest in Internet of Things and FinTech, and have invested in about 100 companies over my career.
I'm Chris Grewe. I'm the CEO and founder of American Prison Data Systems. We are a New York City-based tech startup. We are also a public benefits corporation. Our mission is to provide tools to the folks who run America's very large, very expensive, and arguably dysfunctional correctional systems with tools that help them improve safety, the efficacy of their spend, and most importantly, that work towards delivering better outcomes for incarcerated people. Prior to this, I've been an entrepreneur of one kind or another in the U.S. K-12 educational publishing space, where I've started businesses and worked as an entrepreneur in residence at some large American publishing companies, including Scholastic, the Princeton Review, a handful of others, and I'm also proud to say I'm a Columbia alum.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the panel. Jimmy, I'd like to start with you. You've had the experience of working at two of the largest tech companies in terms of just serviceability and access to the larger public in terms of your experience at LinkedIn and Facebook. Talk a little bit about your experience at both of those companies and their focus on being expansive, as well as what were some of the limitations that you saw, or maybe some areas where they didn't recognize there was opportunity or focus, and then maybe transition that into some of the lessons you've learned there that you want to take into your current early stage startup.
Yeah, so prior to starting this company, I led kind of the traditional Silicon Valley career. I studied computer science at Stanford. I went to work at these kind of different tech companies in Silicon Valley. And these are amazing companies full of really smart people doing kind of really big things. But by and large, the role of the 10,000th employee at Facebook is to increase the number of minutes that someone spends clicking on pictures of cats, right? I think that one of the challenges with Silicon Valley as it exists today is that by and large you've got a lot of companies that are focused on solving the problems that the founders of tech startups have. And so there are tons and tons of companies out there focused on ways to order lunch, or ways to clean your room, or ways to play games. And there aren't a lot of companies out there that solve kind of the social problems that we see throughout America. And so that's why we started Propel in 2014 in Brooklyn, to bring some of the top-tier software development practices of Silicon Valley to an industry and to a set of users that traditionally don't have very good software. And for us, that's people on food stamps.
Great, thank you. Jenny, I have a next question for you, which is, from an investor standpoint, my sense is that when something gets hot, entrepreneurs or folks that want to be entrepreneurs have a tendency to kind of all rush into that space, and a lot of the investment community also rushes into that space, and everyone's kind of focusing on the one thing. How many products or services have you seen out there where you kind of step back and say, wow, these guys are really solving a problem for a group that no one's really paid attention to, and there could be a great opportunity here?
Yeah, so what's interesting about Techstars, because we see so many startups, so we work on, for our accelerators around applications, right? And so if you look at my last program, Internet of Things, we had over 1,000 applications. And so that really affords us an opportunity to kind of front-run trends that you're seeing more generally, right? Because we can look at the data, in aggregate and say, wow, these are new areas that are popping up. And so those are kind of like micro trends, and it's really fun for us to kind of get ahead of that. But I think to your point, we are looking for entrepreneurs that are solving real problems, and I would say, the majority of our applications are nice to have, not must have. And so, we spend a lot of time with the entrepreneurs making sure that, not only is there product market fit, but there's founder market fit, and there's, it kind of aligns with our core beliefs at Techstars. So.
Okay. This is going to come up in a follow-up question for two of the entrepreneurs on the panel here in a second, but my sense is that because the investment community is sometimes so focused on what's hot today, as an entrepreneur, if you're actually really solving a problem for somebody, there's a pain point, but it's not the hot thing today, what recommendation would you provide in terms of how they communicate that to a potential investor or VC to help them see the light?
Yeah, I mean, I think an accelerator is a great way to go because we're not really looking for those hot trends. We're looking for entrepreneurs. So we always say, we invest in these 6 things in this order: team, 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 product, market, and a few other things. So we're really looking for awesome teams of entrepreneurs, and I think that affords the opportunity to differentiate yourself with something that's ahead of the curve. And so we've taken an active role. I'd say 3 years ago we started investing in like frontier tech. So we have a large portfolio of AR and VR and robotics and some of these things that now have become very popular. So I think if you go with early-stage investors like us, we're really willing to look beyond the traditional.
Okay, great, thank you. Jimena, OKCupid, it's always great to have somebody from a dating service on a panel. So many questions that people want me to ask you, right? But my sense is that when you come to a dating site and you're getting it launched, there can be a tendency to gravitate towards what society views as a typical dating profile or the typical type of person who's going to ask somebody out and who wants to be asked out by them. But in fact, especially in the United States and especially in major urban areas, there's a lot of diversity out there in terms of preferences, what people are looking for. And when it's online, there's a lot more flexibility and confidence that someone can have. What did you guys do at OKCupid to make sure you didn't gravitate towards, let's just facilitate something for the status quo dating or the stereotype dating, and how do we make this more expansive to get business in from lots of diverse groups and their preferences?
So I'm going to start with dating tips because I'm sure you're going to find them interesting. In terms of, we actually found on OKCupid that there's, of course, a lot of people that get a lot of likes. That's the people that, on average, everyone thinks that they're good looking. Those people will get X number of messages. But what is really interesting is the people that are found to be polarizing. So either a big set of people will think they're really bad looking, and other people will think that they're really good looking. The reason is that the people that find them really good looking will find them so compelling. It's almost like they find that special match that no one else could see that they had all this potential. So when we talk about what are recommendations for profiles, is that it should not be the thing that you think everyone will like. You need to write about the things that make you different, like from all the quirks of, like myself, I like to do handcrafting for jewelry or things that are just a bit odd, and then there might be someone that really, that resonates with them. So that's the part about if a profile is detailed, it has more chances of getting that special someone that just is intrigued by the thing that you're writing, even if it's a little bit weird. The second part is about not just going by the masses. So at OKCupid, I'll talk about it a little bit later, we took the stance to also launch 22 genders and 13 orientations. And that was a big decision from the business side because we knew that it was not going to be used by a lot of people, and most of the dating is just going to be men, women, and then gay, straight, and bisexual. But then we decided that if it's something so important to people, like who's going to be the person that you might marry, you need to use the words that feel appropriate. So when someone in Kansas, a boy that is 18 years old, can write questioning sexuality, all of a sudden it has the people, when they see it, it's something that it's okay. And then you can say, well, there's so many things about my sexuality that I'm still figuring out. Or in terms of genders, these are all the different genders I align with. So that was more from when you're thinking of a business, it's not for everyone, but it's also about the social responsibility that you have towards the people so that you're advancing towards where society is going, and that it sometimes is not just about the bottom line or revenue, but what should be good.
Great, thank you. Next two questions are related to Chris and Christopher, and I'll ask Christopher to answer this first and then Christopher to follow up. One of the challenges I can imagine about both of your businesses is you're dealing with a labor force that the perception is can be a little bit challenging in terms of showing up on time, delivering service, in terms of your space. Is that a perception that you struggle with or not? And talk a little bit about just dealing with the labor force that you deal with, how you convince your customer that, hey, we're going to provide great service, we're always going to be on time, so on and so forth.
Well, I think it really starts from the heart of Q. I mean, when Q was being developed, we looked at a slate of services and a client of small to medium-sized businesses, and we said, okay, how can we solve a problem for this potential client? And then in looking at that client and over a bunch of services, cleaning, for example, we realized that in the cleaning industry, there's a huge client churn. They churn their cleaning operators a lot every year, but then there's also huge operator churn. We call everyone operators at Q. Huge operator churn every year, and we realized those two things were connected. So you couldn't solve one problem without also trying to solve the other problem. So at Q, we decided to take on trying to create a better work experience for the operator, and that would actually create a better client experience, and the two are linked. So it's not that we go out to the clients and say, hey, our operators are not going to do X. What we've done is we invested in it's called the Good Job Strategy. We invested in a program where we invested in sort of recruiting, training, and then developing our operators within their various service lines. And then we looked at technology to help them do their jobs better, and also how to communicate back and forth with, oh, I'm going to be late because the subway's down. It's not that you're late, it's that you can communicate to the client that you're going to be late, or you were unable to perform a task. So it's not like you're leaving the office space with a task unperformed. The client then knows through technology that, oh, this task wasn't performed because the dishwasher was broken. So it's combining technology not only for the service of the client, but also for the service of the operator to make the whole thing work better.
So it sounds like you've used technology and taken what most people viewed as a cost and an obstacle, and you've taken technology and turned that perceived cost and perceived obstacle into a major financial opportunity for your company and everyone involved.
I mean, we think so because in certain industries, the business in this industry spend a lot of money on replacing revenue for lost clients and spending money on hiring new people for lost operators. And what we looked at is, hey, by investing more money up front to create a better product and a better experience for our employees, we're actually then able to spend that money on growing the business, not replacing the business lost.
Mm-hmm. Great. Related to that, Christopher, just so everyone's clearly aware, your core market are hardcore prisoners, right? People who have been put away because of something bad that they did in society. And you've decided to design a product and service that is going to help them rehabilitate themselves and be more productive citizens in society. sounds like a big waste of time. These guys completely screwed up. They're sitting in prison. What do you think in trying to give them a tablet and technology to do something with?
Oh, there's a lot there. The first thing is, America incarcerates more people than any civilization has in its history, more than the Gulag state. And it's a mixed bag of who ends up incarcerated. There are 2.2 million people behind bars today, another 5.5 million on parole or probation, which means 1 out of every 31 adults in the United States is behind bars. For every Charles Manson that we lock up and never want to see again, and I've sort of given up on, there are lots and lots and lots of folks who've just made bad decisions, ended up in bad circumstances, and hopefully have a bright future ahead of them. And the mission of our business is to the maximum extent possible, give people a second chance. The vast majority of people who are incarcerated in the United States will be released. And they will be back living with us, and we'll see them on the subway. And it's in everyone's best interest that they have the tools that they need to succeed. And so what we're trying to do is use technology to deliver individualized education, rehabilitation, job training, and reentry skills so that folks who have made bad decisions and maybe have been left behind by the school system or other parts of society have an opportunity to start their lives again. And I'm struck by some of the congruences that, and possible opportunities to work together with Jimmy's business and with Chris's. So, one, we shouldn't give up on these folks. Two, they're it's an extremely diverse set. And what we need to do as a mission of our business is, paradoxically, we have taken a large bunch of people who have a very diverse set of education, rehabilitation, job training, and reentry needs, and we've isolated them in the last part of American society where technology cannot reach them. And we've sort of unintentionally put a digital moat around them, which is separating them from the kinds of programs that could really make a difference in their lives. So the mission of our business has been to build a bridge across that moat to allow all of the wonderful things that technology can do, all of those educational programs, to drive across that bridge, but also at the same time safeguard public safety by making sure that, we don't have inmates on Twitter or on Facebook or even OKCupid, I'm sorry to say, until they're out and released, and they have, and then that might be a good thing for them to be doing with their time.
So let's talk dollars and cents, right? Because you're a for-profit venture. How much does it cost to incarcerate somebody in the United States?
We'll start top down. The direct cost of incarceration in the United States are at least $85 billion annually. We've already talked about the numbers of people we incarcerate. So locking up that many people and spending $85 billion a year, it averages $30,000, $35,000 a year to incarcerate someone, depending on where you are. Here in New York City, it's at least $110,000 a year. In Mississippi,
it's more expensive than going to Columbia.
It's much more expensive than going to Columbia. And all of that might be okay if the system, quote unquote, worked. And what do we mean by working in corrections? Making the public safer and hopefully changing lives where that's possible. We have a 43% recidivism rate in this country, which means of the 800,000 people who will be released from prison in the United States, 43% of them will be back in prison within 3 years. So it's not working. And though we have dramatically increased the number of people that we've incarcerated, we have not seen concomitant improvements in public safety or decreases in violence. So what we're doing isn't working, and it's expensive. And so our goal is to be disruptive and to create new tools. The folks who run our correctional institutions are, in general, very well motivated to give the public what they want. They just haven't had the tools to do that, and that's where I see a for-profit, for-purpose business sort of getting in.
So it costs $100,000 in New York City to keep somebody in prison. What are you charging the system to provide education and professional training services to this person so that when they get out of prison, they're not returning because you've given them the skills?
We're in 20 locations across the country. I'm very proud to say that one of those locations is Rikers Island. I'll get very specific about that. We work with all of the juveniles who are in something called East River Academy, which is a high school that's run on Rikers Island. And we work with a good portion of the young adults and some of the highest risk offenders. The average cost is about $1,200 a license seat. And though the most concrete version of our business is people say, oh, you sell tablets. Well, we are in fact, we are a software as a service business. And what matters is not the device itself, but the content that's delivered. And it's very important because this is sort of brass tack stuff. We have to sit down on day one and say, if you invest $1,000 in a software as a service license seat for this inmate, let me show you how that will save you, Mr. Warden, $3,000 in the first year. And that's enough to get over the first threshold. Over time, we hope to have the longitudinal data that suggests that we get at the real cost center and the real benefit, that is, we're reducing recidivism. And a 5%, 10% decrease in recidivism in this country would save state and local and federal institutions and taxpayers billions of dollars.
Okay, great, thank you. Jimmy, I'd like to bring that. Okay.
I actually had a point exactly around that. That was, I've lately been seeing a lot of trends on companies that could do things more efficiently. So for instance, for the government of New York City to transport people that are handicapped, it's really expensive because they need to have the schedule, they need to go pick them up, and it's just, it's something that is really inefficient. So for instance, right now they're collaborating or starting a program with Uber where they can say, we can actually do the transportation more efficiently because we don't need to buy the trucks and hire the drivers and do all the infrastructure around it. What I think I'm even more interested in, I talked last week with the CEO of a company called Joyable, and they do mental health programs. And I was really excited because they're basically using technology for something that has so much stigma. Like, people actually don't like to talk about depression or other mental issues that they have. And if you think about Duolingo, that's a personalized tool that allows you to learn something. Well, in the same way, they can do programs now that allow you to talk about the problems that you could have, and over time accomplish a lot of it's almost like going to therapy without actually having to even go outside of your door, and they're trying to reach people that don't even want to talk about the problems that they have. So because it's a tech panel, I think that what is exciting is that you have people like Jimmy building companies that are helping people, but also that technology is not only now, as it was before, social media, and then it went to fintech or health tech, but it's also addressing issues that the society has. So over time, tech will just be a means towards helping people in more efficient ways.
Sure. And Jimmy, you have a similar business model where today there's a major societal cost around food stamps, and you've recognized that pain point. Talk a little bit about just the pure economics of your business, because today the industry and the base that you're focusing on, I think a lot of Americans would just view it as, it's a cost, it's inefficient. Talk about the economics of how you're able to create a for-profit business and a social good.
Yeah, so let me start with the size of the program. There are 45 million Americans on food stamps today. So every table in this room has about 7 chairs. That's about 1 chair at every table is somebody who's on food stamps. Combined, the food stamp program is about $70 billion each year. This is money that ends up being spent at grocery stores. So about 12% of the American retail grocery industry is actually food stamps. It's a huge industry. There are a ton of people who kind of experience it. And their day-to-day experience with the program turns out is not very good. Now, I think if you've gone to the DMV or applied for a visa, you probably have a sense that, interacting with a government website or filling out a paper form can be really frustrating. I can tell you the same is true for a single mother who's trying to apply for food stamps, or somebody who has benefits and is trying to understand how to best use their food stamps. So our core product is actually just a smartphone app. So it's an app called Fresh EBT that works a little bit like Mint.com for people on food stamps. So it helps people understand their current balance, to see their transaction histories, and to create these budgets that help them stretch their benefits to where they want to be. Our business comes from helping our users discover other products and services that make them more physically and financially healthy. And so there's kind of 2 categories of that. The first one are kind of grocery stores. So last month, our users spent about $40 million combined in food stamps at grocery stores. How do we use that combined purchasing power to get them savings on the food that they're already going to purchase? Our second business model is financial service referrals. So we have a population that's traditionally preyed on pretty significantly by the financial services industry, but we think there's a large and growing segment of companies out there building pro-social financial services that can replace some of these old, stodgy financial services that would just aim to to kind of rip people off. So these are things like online replacements for payday loans or for check cashing or for title loans. How do we introduce our users to those things in a way that makes them more financially healthy?
So I see an interesting thread taking place here. I think oftentimes when you go to a lot of panel discussions about entrepreneurship, to the earlier point about most people are trying to solve problems that are issues for themselves or their friends, and they may be masked in like, I'm changing the world. In fact, they're just trying to make their life a little bit better. I see an interesting thread here where there are millions of Americans who are in the prison system that have no experience with technology. If you have no experience with technology, it's going to be hard for you to be a productive person in society. A lot of the folks that are coming out of the prison system at first may need to be on food stamps.
Yes.
The challenge is they may not have the comfort level in terms of how to apply for something, how to use technology, and now there's a business model that can help service that. In all seriousness, you get out of prison, you need to build a social network and you need to find a partner, and there's online networks to do that, but if you don't know how to use technology, you're out of it now, and then there's job opportunities. So it's interesting to see how just putting that seed in there allows the ecosystem to be built.
Literally reading my mind as I'm listening to Chris and to Jimmy. And the use of technology is a 21st century life skill. I've been collecting in my mind the numbers of jobs that you simply can't do if you don't understand technology. And let's be clear, if you 40 blocks from here is an institution called the Castle, which is run by the Fortune Society, where folks who've spent more than 10 or 15 years in New York State prisons come and spend a year before fully reintegrating into society. Those folks have never owned a smartphone, never had a tablet. The world has completely changed. And I have a listing in my mind of all of the very basic sort of entry-level jobs you simply cannot do in this society. Can't work for FedEx, can't work at a grocery store stocking a shelf if you don't know one of these guns or how to operate an Android tablet. So there are a lot of affinities. I see one other sort of connecting point, which is there are things that government wants to do, and actually only government can give $70 billion in food to single moms and others. But they often cannot go the last mile or the last yard with regards to technology to getting it right. All of their websites are kludgy. They don't have a budget line to build an app or to make that last connection. And so the question is, can you help government achieve its goals and still start a great business? And I think you can. And increasingly, these double bottom line businesses that identify compelling pain points and sort of an unmet need and a gap, and disruptively making money while doing well, doing good. I see lots of successful businesses in that space, and I commend you, Jimmy. I think what you're doing is incredibly important, and everyone who leaves prison needs to know about his site. Yeah.
And I can tell you also, from an aggregate of our, hundreds of thousands of applications that we get, every year increasingly more double bottom line. So if you look at my last fintech class, we had 10 companies. We had 2 that were had an angle that were socially responsible, sustainable. Now I have an Internet of Things program, and one of the new areas is around smart cities, right? Which wasn't a term that really we had a few years ago, right? And so these new verticals, I think, are popping up that do have, a social element, and we're seeing that reflected in the entrepreneurs that we're funding.
Yeah, and even for the government, I think that even though it has taken them a bit of time, they recently recruited Megan Smith, who's the CTO of the United States. And in one panel like this one, I actually met the Chief Data Officer of the Department of Commerce. And it turns out that I was actually talking about the different genders that OKCupid had. And a couple of weeks later, he told me, we're thinking about how to move forward with gathering census data so that it's not just binary. So they were actually reaching out to startups to say, how did you think about it? Which genders, which lists, which associations? So I think that it'll take time, and we can be innovating. But also I see much more openness and willingness to change things. And also a lot of people, perhaps you, that are interested in that are joining those teams within the government to speed things up.
Great. So I'd like to transition the conversation we've been having now to a conversation about gender from an entrepreneurial perspective, but as well as from an investor perspective, and discuss it around inclusion. So I'll start with you, Jenny. What has been your experience as a woman investor, but also just watching how many submissions you get from female-led companies or companies that have female executives, and then once you've invested in those companies, What have you seen? And then one final sort of question to top that off. How many applications do you get for companies that are developing technologies that service women?
So lots of questions there, but to start off, I mean, it's a huge problem, right? So even at a place like Techstars, which is, we spend a lot of time actively soliciting people internally that of diverse origins. We've made a pledge to the White House to increase, I think, double the number of female entrepreneurs and diverse candidates, year over year. So even at a place that is really focused on it, there are, we run 24 accelerator programs, there are 24 managing directors, and I'm the only female. And sometimes I run 2 programs, so sometimes they count me twice and say there's 2 female MDs. I'm like, it's just me. So, obviously it's a huge problem. And we're open about it at Techstars, and we're trying to do something about it. And I think that in terms of our kind of recruiting efforts and our selection efforts, we're taking steps, whether it's about having a selection committee that is full of diverse individuals, whether it's about reaching out to communities that are not necessarily prone to, applying to accelerators or whatnot. So we're taking the stance that you can't just say it's a pipeline problem, that you have to go out to these communities. And listen, it's hard. Our average accelerator program, depending on what the vertical is, only has a few, say, female entrepreneurs. I run probably the 2 hardest verticals, Internet of Things and hardware, and fintech, right? And so, but instead of saying, well, this is the best we can do, we actively go out and cultivate those communities. And so, we're trying. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're out there in our own business trying to transform it, as well as in the companies that we invest in.
And Chris, how about in your business? Do you find any challenges from a gender perspective when you're trying to recruit folks? Any challenges or opportunities that you see around the gender question, inclusion, and technology?
I mean, I think that the question sort of around, why is the tech world not more diverse? I mean, I think how Managed by Q has sort of approached the problem is, in 3 ways. So one, through leadership. So from the very start, our founders were saying this business had to be diverse. It had to be in our DNA, that across the board we were looking for a diverse company, not only obviously at the client operator level, but at the whole company. And then with that we tried to be very inclusive of not just women, not just minorities, but the idea is like the whole designing programs, designing benefits, designing social events, so that everyone was included. Everyone's together as one group. It's not there are 7 groups and we're all in the company. It's one group and we are together. And then the last part is like vigilance. So I think it's easy when you're 10 people in a room to say, hey, we're diverse and this is our culture. And then when you're 1,000 people, it's harder to do that. And sometimes the benefits or the culture might change. So you have to be vigilant on a very regular basis and say, does this still work for us? Are we doing this? And really analyzing it to make sure that you're still holding to your core goal of diversity. And I think that's where Q is succeeding. And I think, if companies really started to focus on it, I think they would also succeed. It is, it is very hard, but it has to be something that you do every day.
Thank you. Jimena, I have a question. So you're a senior executive at a dating site. 50% of your customer base are women. Is 50% of the management team women?
We were only 2 senior C-level executives during the IPO, and yes, therefore it was 50-50. We have definitely, most recently we had the same number of directors, but I think that's something that I wanted to open up. When I think about diversity, a lot of companies will not go to very specific places where there's diversity to hire. You're all very privileged to be at Columbia, where a lot of the big consulting firms, the big banks and tech companies will make a stop here just to talk with you. And all of those big companies will have all of the diversity groups that it's really great to network with. You'll have the LGBT group, the women in tech, etc. But I think that your duty as people that have succeeded already so much in their careers, it's going to be twofold. For women, when you're selecting offers, make sure that you're actually negotiating well your offers. Just yesterday, I put it on Twitter, I saw a stat of how women coming out of MIT for engineering degrees, they get an offer that is 10K lower than those of male engineers from the same schools. So I think if that's what's coming from big companies, it is up to us to say, like, no, we actually deserve the same salary, and we're going to start our careers from the same level. The second part is when you guys are going to be managing companies, it's where do you go recruit. For instance, at OKCupid, we of course went to MIT and came to Columbia, went to Carnegie Mellon, but then we started also going to places where there was more diversity. We went to, for instance, the Flatiron School, where it's people that had other careers, decided to transition to developing, and then it was more about giving them the opportunity that perhaps only with 5 months of coding experience, we were going to give them a chance. So I think that's something that's really important for companies, for diversity, where if the applicants are not sending their applications, perhaps they don't think that they're good enough. So, and you should not just continue the problem by only going to the places that are given, but also finding where those diversity candidates are and going to community colleges and just giving them a chance.
That's a great point. Jimmy, my perception is that there's a larger percentage of the people applying for and using food stamps who are women than men. That's a perception, so please correct that perception if it's wrong. And if it's true, do you take that into account in terms of how you communicate your product and develop your service?
Absolutely. So the stat is around 60 to 40. 60% of people who manage food stamps for their household are female. But actually for our user base, it skews even heavily towards female. So we found that about 85% of our users are women. We didn't plan for that. We didn't market specifically towards that. It just happened to be the case. And so we fundamentally cannot be a team of dudes building a product used primarily by women on food stamps. We are still a fairly small startup. We're based in Brooklyn. We're only 6 people right now. So we are kind of an aspirational force in hiring rather than able to really make a dent right now. But it is absolutely something that we care really deeply about, the fact that our company needs to reflect the type of product we're trying to build.
Great. So we have a few minutes left on the panel. I wanted to just open it up for questions from the audience in the event that anybody has a question for the panel in general or any of the specific panelists. Anybody have a question out there? Anybody? Go ahead in the back there. Yeah. Could you go ahead and stand up and just kind of say your name? You know what? Would you mind coming up to the front and yeah, thank you. And just repeat again, sorry, your name and where you're from.
Hello. My name is Adrian Lee, and I'm at Cornell University. I'm a junior studying industrial and labor relations. And my question is, so right now we were just talking about diversity and going to community colleges to recruit instead of going to the big name universities like Cornell, Columbia, etc. And what I've been studying recently is like labor economics. And so one of the big things that we're learning is that people go to Cornell, Columbia to recruit because like these big name colleges, like companies assume that the filtering has already been done for these highly qualified candidates. And so I'm wondering, like, definitely at these community colleges and like not lower tiered, but like the perception is that these colleges are less known and therefore students are less qualified. And I don't believe that's true. And so I was just wondering, what are some ways that we can provide incentives to companies who are recruiting to go to these community colleges, because it's like, in their opinion, it's less costly to go to these higher, like better known universities to recruit because it's like more cost effective, if you will, because the filtering has been done. Just not something I believe.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to take a swing at that, and it's a great question, thank you. From our experience here in New York, one of the places that we recruit heavily from is the John Jay School of Criminal Justice here. We also have seen some terrific applicants from CCNY and CUNY and others. I'm not sure that I have a systematic response, but maybe this contributes. My experience is that many of the criticisms that folks sometimes have of millennials in the workforce as wanting to be promoted to senior vice president on day 3, or maybe not having the grit to sort of, that is not true of the folks that you get at John Jay or CUNY or at city universities and community colleges. I'm looking for folks who have something else, really sort of proven grit and resilience and persistence. And yes, you can find folks like that at Columbia, and you can find folks like that at Cornell, but almost everybody who gets out of Hunter or CCNY or some of these other facilities has had to really work a couple of jobs, balance their priorities, and get through. And as someone who's been, running startups more or less for 25 years and hiring, some of my very best experiences have been from hiring folks from non-traditional, hotbeds of where you get your next investment banker from. So I'm not sure how we communicate that to the world, other than maybe getting entrepreneurs who have built businesses to scale to communicate and say, actually, there's terrific talent in those places. You are penny wise and pound foolish if you don't go and look there.
Yeah. I'll give you, thank you for that. I'll give you one anecdotal story to add to the panel. One of the common themes amongst all entrepreneurs is that in the fundraising process and in the startup process, you are going to hear no 9 out of 10 times. The people who are successful are the ones that persevere, so that 1 out of 10 times they hear a yes, they capitalize on it. And people in the United States who come from challenging backgrounds, challenging families, challenging income levels, challenging neighborhoods, and they make it all the way through graduating from whatever university in America, that is somebody who 9 times out of 10 in their life was told no, but the one time that they got a yes, they capitalized on it. Whereas sometimes in the Ivy League experience, it's the fortune of the right family, the right school, the right college, the right job, the right graduate school, and the person has worked extremely hard to accomplish all of that. The handicap that they have is they haven't experienced no. And so they then get into that entrepreneurial experience, and for the first time in their life, when they really have to perform, they're hearing the word no constantly. And for all the preparation they've done in life, they're not prepared for that experience. Where someone who has gone just as far, but actually heard no most of their time in their life, they're actually extremely well suited for an entrepreneurial environment where someone's saying no, or I don't know who you are, or I'm just not ready to give you a chance, doesn't really faze them. It's what they've heard all their life, and they're just going to move on to the next person and try to get a yes. And that's my encouragement for everybody in the hiring process, to cast a wide net, but also for the folks who have the good fortune of being here, to make sure you put yourself in challenging situations where you hear no, because that's what will really prepare you for participation in an entrepreneurial venture. We have time for one last question. Go ahead. State your name, where you're from, and just a very brief question.
Thank you very much. My name is Andy Wang. I'm actually from Canada, but I'm here at Columbia's School of International Affairs and studying my Master's of Public Administration. I worked in government in Canada for about 6 years. I'm trying to transition and do social entrepreneurship starting here at Columbia. So my question is more maybe for Jimmy and for Chris, maybe other panelists can jump in. You're working on something that has great social impact. There's definitely, I would assume there's a lot of government interest. So how would you see them in terms of partnering with government agencies, or potentially are they a barrier to your growth in your business? Maybe can you add on some more light on that?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. It's look, the government program and the government administration of food stamps is, a lot of research has been done on kind of the effects on poverty, and is widely considered one of the best things that American society has done to combat food poverty in our history. So it's an amazing program, and it's run by really smart people. We see ourselves, rather than as working directly with government in kind of a financial sense, it's more like TurboTax, right? So in the same way that TurboTax isn't legally affiliated with the IRS, they're just building software that improves a program by sitting on top of it. We think that there's kind of a model for us to improve this government program and kind of to allow the government to do what it is that they do best, which is maintain kind of the complex bureaucracy and all this other stuff that goes behind funding and administering this huge program. We think we're better at kind of taking it this very last mile, right, which is relating to consumers directly.
And in that sense, we're sort of the opposite side of the coin, in that our customers are government, the City of New York, the State of Indiana, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And what we need to do there is to identify what are the core competencies of our customers, what do they do better than anybody else, what in fact do they do that no other entity could do, like take someone's freedom away from them. And then what are the things that are not their core competencies? And for instance, technology innovation, investment in technology innovation is something that government struggles with mightily. It's not just, and thank you very much for making the point that government is catching up and getting better technology skills. But they don't typically have the ability to go to a state legislature and Congress and say, hey, give me $50 million while I build this thing that may or may not work, that might make things better. But entrepreneurs can do that, and one of the things that we're really working hard to do is to try to leverage private risk capital to solve government problems. And so it is a complex relationship. It's based on trust. We are in a government sales cycle. But what we're trying to do is to let government focus on the things that only it can do, that it does well, and then putting some risk capital at work to build tools and solutions that they can take advantage of, buy at a fair price, and then do. So I think that there are increasingly excellent entrepreneurial opportunities for people who really understand government well and look at the things that it needs that no one else is providing yet.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to make a point around diversity. When we were talking about you already are here at Columbia or at many other good schools, and you perhaps you have already gotten to a point where many people haven't. I wanted almost to make an open invitation for you to represent where you came from, in the sense that diversity exists anywhere. It can be women, it can be black or Latino, it can be LGBT, anyone represents, like someone coming from a very small town in the USA that is very Republican, or whatever it is. And my point is that as you grow, as you continue developing your career, how do you also get other people that came from where you were to actually join you? There's groups already at Columbia, likely related to diversity, where people that perhaps they don't even think that they'll have a chance to get here are just sending emails to. So I think that it's our duty as we're progressing to show up, and I think for a lot of us, that's the reason why I come to panels, because if I'm not here, then there's one less person that is women and Latino that is coming up. So it's more of an invitation. If you've already gotten here, perhaps you already have the tools to inspire some other people and help out in whatever your diversity area is.
Great. I want to thank everybody on the panel. I know we had a lot of folks on the panel, so I appreciate everyone's very direct and specific and worthwhile comments. So thank you for joining the panel, and thank you to you guys, and let's give our panel. Thank you, everybody.